All right, so we're joined here with our good friend Crystal, um, who lives in Montoursville, which is a little city next to Williamsport.
Yep.
And Calvin, I don't know if I told you how we met Crystal. I don't know how
No, you
Crystal
have not.
knows Kendra. I guess you guys go way back.
Way back to Faith Church. She was in the youth group when I was in worship team. And we all kind of, I don't know, I was always kind of attracted to Kendra and Kaylin's, like, just,
Twinness.
yeah, they're just so, like, loving. Like,
Yeah.
every time I would see them, they would give me a big old monster hug. And, I don't know, they're good people. And I love surrounding myself with people who are just, like, loving on people no matter what. I've always felt that they have been really, what's the word?
Hospitable, friendly,
Real.
decent, real.
Yeah, there's nothing fake about them, and
There it is.
I love that.
Yeah, sincere.
Yes, that's it.
I mean, not to
Authentic.
put words in your mouth, but
Yeah.
if those were the words that you're trying to think of, then
Yeah, because
I will.
I don't word good. Okay.
So,
I mean, especially after 9 o'clock, it's kind of hard to.
This is my time of the day, though. Like, this is when I start to work. And
yeah, for those of you who are not us, it's 10:12
yes,
on a Monday night. This is how we roll.
I think the Monday part, that's probably the hard part.
Yeah, true. So that's how my wife knows Crystal here. How I know Crystal, Calvin, you might not know this, but I know Crystal because of Target.
Really?
Yeah, pretty much every single time we went to Target, we would run into this lady, and I was like, she's an interesting person. No, but like
I've been called worse.
but yeah, anytime that we ran into Crystal, it was just like, this lady's really raw and real. So yeah, goes both ways. That sincerity.
Thank you.
And yeah, so Crystal, I don't really have like a huge game plan for this conversation, but I just know that you love people and that you love Jesus, and like
Absolutely.
just want to kind of delve into some of your story and whatnot. So yeah, if you want to share a little bit of like who you are and how you got that way.
Who you are. Is that all one word? Yeah,
Who you are,
absolutely.
yep. In Middle Pennsylvania, it is one word.
Absolutely. Well, I'm Crystal, and I just turned 40, which was interesting. I'm a firm believer that you have to grow old, but you don't have to grow up.
Hey.
I've owned my own business for about 7 or 8 years now. I just started getting real super serious about it within the last 2. I do leather work and jewelry and pretty much a jack of all trades and master of none. I
Know that life.
Yeah, I just I find something that really interests me, and I have to learn it and get all the tools, and then I get bored and move on. As far as my like personal walk with Christ, I was told about Jesus when I was 7 by my sister. She used to go to this is kind of a funny story, but she used to go to guitar lessons, and they didn't really do guitar lessons. They just smoked pot and, shot the you-know-what. And one day they go and her and her best friend Tony, they go to this guy's house for their lesson, and he's like, no, we're not going to do what we normally do. I got to tell you guys, I found out about Jesus, and I need to tell you. And so that
the guitar
day,
teacher.
the guitar teacher who was, just kind of blazing up with him every week was
Wow.
the first person to share Jesus with him. So if that doesn't
Right
tell you
on.
if you don't leave this with anything else, know that it doesn't matter what your background is, God can use you. So he told them about Jesus. They both accepted Christ that day.
Yeah.
And then my sister came home and told me, and
Is
was
she
reading
an
me.
older sister?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Okay.
My sister's my siblings are all a little older than me. She's 16 years older.
Oh, wow.
My other sister's 15 years older, and my brother's 12 years older. I was the result of a little camping trip to get away from the kids. I was called, I was called the souvenir.
Hey.
So yeah, so that day, my sister came home, told me all about Jesus, and I distinctly remember drawing a picture for him in crayon, because that was my thing. I always loved art, and I put it on the fridge, and nobody knows what happened to it. But I told my sister I was drawing it for Jesus, because it's really like all a kid knows what to do with all that information. Like, you want to be grateful, but that's pretty much all you got. And so yeah, that picture was never seen again, but she's like, that's really, really sweet that you want to do that, but here's what you can do to, ask Jesus in your heart. And that's...
I just want to draw pictures, though.
Yeah. I was like, I don't know what that means, but I'll draw him a picture. So, so yeah, that's where it all started. And I started going to... This guy started leading Bible study, so I started going to Bible study. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was just like a fresh new Christian?
Absolutely, he was all in it. And he actually just passed away this year. Oh. And
oh, wow.
But he was instrumental in my whole family getting saved, because my sister Kim was the one who just kind of lit the fire. Yeah. So, up till that point, we were all born in Catholic Church, and we had all stopped going to church, period. And I think we just all lost interest. And once we got to know Jesus, some neighbors moved in across the street, and whom I'm still friends with today, and they live in California. They invited me and my sister to church, and then when they moved, then my dad had to start taking us, so then he got involved, and then eventually my mom started to go. So it was just, and now when I look back at what my family looked like when I was 8, 10, 11, all my siblings were, into some sort of drug or another, drinking, whatnot. Just not living their best life. And I look at my family now, and the legacy that we're all leaving for our kids, that everybody is just actively in love with Christ and pursuing that life with him. It just blows my mind. Like, when I think about how far we've all come, and how now we're all having our own kids, and hopefully, growing them up and training them up in the way that they should be. I just... only God can do that, you know? Yeah. Only God can perform that kind of heart surgery, It's just insane. So, yeah. So, I don't know. My ears get really red when I get nervous, and I can feel the heat radiating off of them. So, yeah.
Well, all the pressure. So
yeah. Seriously. Whew. All right. Hot flash. Yeah, so I was the typical Christian teen in high school. Mm-hmm. Wore all the right T-shirts, listened to all the right music.
The cheesy stuff.
Oh yeah. I had one that had Jesus playing soccer in front of. And he was a goalie, and it said "Jesus saves."
Yeah,
that was one of my favorites.
Yep.
I was all about what looked right, and I wasn't in a deep relationship by any means.
Mm. Would you say, like, during that time as a teenager, you continued following Christ, but maybe it looked a completely different way?
Yeah,
or like, what was it?
I was doing what I was supposed to do. I was going to church on Sunday morning and going to youth group on Sunday night, and I was doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. Yeah. Like, it was kind of a mile wide and an inch deep. That was where my faith was. I think that where it really got called in to question my faith is the summer after I graduated. TWA Flight 800 had crashed, and there were kids on there from my graduating class and from the underclassmen. 21 people in total from our town. It was something you can't really explain.
Where did the crash take place?
It was the French club was heading to France, and it was in July. And
so this was right after graduation?
This was literally right after graduation. And I spent my entire summer going to memorials and candlelight vigils and funerals, and every time we'd get done burying somebody else, it would be time for somebody else's funeral.
Gosh.
And it was probably every couple of days, the whole summer. And then all of a sudden I was in Boston for school.
Wow.
So it was, but I distinctly remember kind of just walking in a fog through life. I remember getting somewhere and having no idea how I got there.
Yeah.
My sister pulled me aside that summer and she was like, "You're being a real jerk to like everybody." Mm-hmm. And I didn't care. It's like
going through a lot.
Yeah.
Gosh. So was it 21 classmates that passed away? Or?
It was not. It was classmates and chaperones and teachers as well. So it was one of the people that really affected me the most was Wendy. She was an underclassman. She was not a popular girl. Neither was I. She did her own thing, and she really didn't care much what other people thought. That's what I think I really liked about her. Mm-hmm. She was a musician. We had kept in touch over the summers, but I remember her sitting alone at lunch, and like all my little Christian friends who we all did Bible study stuff together, I was like, can we like just have her come sit and eat lunch with us, because she was sitting by herself, and she would come sit and have lunch with us, and she wouldn't really participate in like we didn't really have like religious conversations during lunchtime or anything, but like I would invite her to Bible study and stuff. She'd like, no thanks, but it was cool, whatever. The last day of school before the crash, I got this little note on my locker with a little posy that she had picked, and it said, "Praise the Lord, I'm saved."
Yeah.
And I stood there at my locker and I'm like dumbfounded. And I ran to the band room because I knew that's where she'd be. Yeah. She was a band geek just like me. And I was like, "Dude, what's this all about?" And she goes, "You guys just accepted me like as I was."
That's so sick.
I'm just like floored. And the fact that, I don't know, I was just talking to Libby about this earlier, about how God gives you these glimpses of what he's doing through you that you don't deserve it. Mm-hmm. He doesn't need to use me. He could do it all on his own if he wanted to. Yeah. But you think to yourself, you're like, why me? Like, who am I that he should take time out of the 7 bazillion people there are and say, "I love you. Mm-hmm. You're doing okay." Or,
like lets us even play a part in what he has going on.
Yeah, like you get to be a piece of that puzzle. Yeah, it is, because you're sitting there thinking, why? It blew my mind. It really did. And I just remember feeling overjoyed, and we kept in touch for the next month or so after school. And she had gone to Carnegie. She won a contest and got to play at Carnegie. And she sent me this picture of her, and I still have that and the little note in my Bible. And when I first heard about the plane crash, my best friend had called me, and he's like, "Have you been watching the news?" I'm like, "No." So, well, the plane took off from New York at the airport there. I can't remember what the name of it is, but and the plane blew up after takeoff.
It was right after takeoff.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh well, I'm sure they're fine. If it's after takeoff, like they were close to the ground, so they're okay. Like, never in a million years would I expect that it blew up, like, over the ocean and that no one survived. Like, this is at, 7:37, 7:47. Mm-hmm. And it was, I don't think it set in for, like, days afterwards. When we started getting confirmation that, bodies were being found, it was horrendous. I mean, there was every news station you can imagine at the high school. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting with my friend Erica, who had lost her little sister in the plane crash. I remember one of the news anchors from like NBC or ABC or whatever it was. They were just so brash and uncaring, and were just like shoving microphones on people's faces. And they had no idea who she was or who she had lost. Mm-hmm. And
they just knew that she was like a local or
like we were sitting
a student,
we were sitting on that like little stoop, like next to the front doors, like, and it's the middle of summer, but everybody's just kind of like at the high school, just kind of commiserating and being miserable together. And we're sitting on the front stoop, and this anchor came over and shoved a microphone in her face and was like, well, how does this make you feel? And I just remember her looking at her and going, I lost my sister. How do you think it makes me feel?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of question is that? None of us even know what to feel at this point, you know? So, yeah, it was a crazy, crazy, awful thing that I would never wish on anybody. But I took that and I went to Eastern Nazarene College. It was in Quincy, right outside of Boston. Tiny little Christian college. And I'm a firm believer that if you have gone to a Christian school and you come out still a Christian, good for you, because I don't think if I stayed there for 4 years, I'd still be one. It was very legalistic, very hard to be there, and believe in any kind of grace. Or I met some good people that I still love very much, and are still. I mean, one of those people is my best friend, and wouldn't trade her for the world. We have very similar beliefs and thoughts on things, but yeah, it was definitely it was an area of my life that I needed to go through, but it showed me a lot of ugly sides of church that, as you know, you see those anywhere, but I wasn't prepared for that. So, but yeah, and I came home after a year because I couldn't afford it anymore, and transferred to local school, got my business degree, and got involved in church here. I had met my husband Kevin in college, so we called each other our like $20,000 spouse, because you know that's how much it cost to go there for a year. And so we ended up getting married in '99, and we always said we wanted to wait and have kids. And then we wanted to wait a little longer and have kids. And we moved to Lancaster, where it was easier to find jobs and stuff like that. And we started going to a Brethren church, where I started having the ability to question things without being judged. Like, you know, I remember my first like Sunday school with a friend of mine, Jeff, who's now a pastor. And he said, all right. And he clapped his hands together. He goes, let's talk about abortion. And immediately wanted to leave. I wanted to just flee out of the room, because just at the churches that I had gone to before, it wasn't okay to even bring up the subject. Like, if you're a Christian, you need to feel this way, and that's all there is. Yeah. That's the only way to feel.
No conversation about anything.
Absolutely. No conversation, no grace, no nothing. And it made me so uncomfortable. And I'm like sitting there like cringing. And he looks at me and he is like, how do you feel? I'm like, pro-life. Like, I thought I could get out of it by just giving the right answer and not having to talk about it. But we had a discussion over the next hour about, like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? You know, and he made me think outside my comfort zone, you know, and just outside the box about different scenarios, and taking into account, you know, tragedy and trauma and all these things. And it didn't necessarily change my stance per se, but it changed the way that I think and feel. Because I think, I just lost my ear. I think when you make up your mind to just stick to a certain stance on something because of your faith, you lose out on the conversation of why people feel the way that they do. Like, you lose out on getting to know people. And because for a long time I was like, well, I'm not going to talk about it because you're not going to change my mind. It's kind of an ignorant way to look at things, because even if I don't change my mind, I know why you feel that way. And I can put myself then in other people's shoes who feel like you. So
and a matter of like hearing people in the first place.
Oh,
you know?
Absolutely. I mean,
and, I know. I feel like more often than not, I've sometimes just like vocalize where I'm at on something. Without like that empathy, you know. I mean, that happened recently, like on social media. But there was a friend of mine that like I really hurt because of the way that I reacted to something that she said.
Right.
I had to come to a point of like, all right, like I didn't say it like this, but like the reality was like, the way that I feel about this is how I expressed it. But that was kind of I don't know, irrelevant. Yeah. The fact of the matter was that I created a scenario where she wasn't heard.
Yeah.
And very much so, like, didn't feel like that it was possible to have a conversation with me.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is like, if we're creating space to be just polarizing, and like not allowing conversation to happen, like
Right.
that's not the heart of Christ.
Well, and I think that when people feel heard, they feel loved because, I think one of the things that are probably one of the most obnoxious things about church people, I guess I'll say it that way, to me is just not being willing to say, okay, well, how do you feel about this? And why do you feel that way? Because I think people want you to know about them, but they want to be given an opportunity to share that with knowing that they're not going to be immediately judged.
Yeah.
Because, some of my views don't line up with what my church might think. But I know that there are people in my church that I can talk to about that, right up to the pastor and say, hey, like, I don't really believe in that, whatever that may be. And I don't feel judgment, and I think that's one of the reasons I really love my church is because, like, it took me a long time to find a space where I felt safe to do that. So yeah, it's, I think what has brought me to this stage in my faith, to be honest, is a truckload of tragedy. There's not really any other way to put it, but after we had kids, things started to fall apart. We adopted my son out of a very traumatic situation, where his mom was a drug user and he was abandoned, which then he came with quite a bit of baggage emotionally and physically. We had a baby at the same time we were adopting, which was, if I had it to do over again, I probably wouldn't change it because I think God knew what he was doing, giving me two babies at once because it scared the living poop out of me, and I think my tubes tied themselves. So, sorry, you might have to edit that out. My apologies. Anyways,
I didn't realize that you were adopting I didn't realize like the time period.
Actually, Kevin and I had 3 miscarriages.
Yeah.
Libby was actually conceived on birth control because I told the doctor I can't do this anymore. I can't go
That's
through
a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely horrific going through a miscarriage, and I don't care what stage you go through it at. If you have gone through it, please find somebody to talk to, because there's no stage of that, whether you're the woman or the man, that you can't just get through with some counseling of some sort. Deal with it, because it will haunt you if you don't. When I finally went to the doctor and I said, look, I can't go through the heartbreak of losing another baby. Put me on something so so that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
So he did. And we signed paperwork to start the adoption process, an interstate adoption from Florida, to get our nephew Josiah, who is now my son.
Oh, I didn't realize he was your nephew.
Yes.
Okay.
He was my now ex-husband's sister's child.
Okay.
And part of the deal, we had to approach her and say, look, what you say determines what we're going to do, but we've seen his older siblings live with mom and without mom and with mom and without mom, and how that's affected them. So if we're going to help you with Josiah, we're adopting him. So you need to sign over your rights. Because we can't go through, I knew I wouldn't be able to take the heartbreak of losing him. I knew that for sure.
Yeah.
We signed the paperwork on a Friday, and Sunday I walked out to go to church and threw up on the front step. And I went, well, that was weird. I'm one of those people who holds it in for 24 hours. And so I got to church, and it was one of the times that I wasn't actually leading worship. Kevin was there early because he was doing sound, and I was sitting in the back and I was singing, and it wasn't an audible voice. It was like this impression on my brain. You're going to have 2 kids. And I'm like, excuse me?
Yeah.
And I just, again, I got this impression. You're pregnant and you're adopting and you're going to have 2 kids. And I just broke down in tears. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I'm not ready for this.
That is not the plan.
That is not my plan. No, thank you. I ran out of the church. I drove directly to the closest drugstore and I bought 3 of the most expensive tests that they had. At that time, you know, the little digital readout ones were like $30 a piece. I took them home and I peed on all the sticks, and pregnant, like, instantly popped up, and I had a mental breakdown in my bathroom. So,
Yeah.
because I'm like, okay, I did. I had like a complete breakdown.
Now, I mean, maybe in hindsight, but at the time, was there any part of you that was like, all right, considering everything, like, I don't know, like, this is clearly a God thing? Or was that not?
It was absolute 100% fear. It was,
Hey, that's fair. But
it was absolute fear. I was afraid what was going to happen. And this gives you an idea of what I thought of God at the time, who God was to me.
Yeah.
I thought that God was going to dangle this carrot of having my own baby in front of me, and the idea of adopting a boy that I loved already.
Yeah.
And I was going to lose them both.
Yeah.
I just, that was my understanding of God, was that he was kind of the kid with the magnifying glass on the anthill. Like, I kept
seeing
hearing
how much you could endure or something.
Yeah,
something.
exactly. Yeah. Like, and how much ever you could endure, that was what made you a better Christian. Like that suffering per se, for the sake of Christ. Like, I can't tell you how many times I heard that growing up, in church. And I remember being like, okay, I can get through this. Okay, I can get through. Everything was something I could just get through. And I went to my pastor, probably like the next day or 2 days later. Side note, his name was Shrek Eyes, and we called him Shrek. So awesome pastor,
glorious,
awesome man. But I went to him and I'm like, dude, this is what I'm dealing with. And he goes, okay, well, I'm smart enough to know that you need to see a counselor. And he said that I'm not equipped to handle this. I'm like, okay. So he sent me to this place in Lancaster. I think it was called Crossroads something or other. And I walked in and I said, the lady's asking me what's going on, and I said exactly what I said to you. I said, I feel like God is dangling these carrots out in front of me and taking them back. She looked at me and she said, do you really feel like God would do that? And I said, well, obviously, I'm sitting here talking to you about it. Like, this is how I feel. Yeah. And she told me I was ridiculous. So I said, okay, well, obviously we're done here.
Yeah.
And I walked out. And at that point, I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to see a counselor again. Never, right? And so God saw that as a challenge, I believe. So we're talking like, this is around like 2005. And we had Libby, or we picked up Joe in January of 2006. We had Libby in March.
Oh, wow.
So I had 2 babies in 2 months. And I didn't know what to do with either of them, honest to God. Like, I was always the youngest. I was the youngest cousin. I was the youngest sibling. I didn't babysit. I didn't like kids. I didn't... Like, even as a kid, I didn't like kids. I was like, I didn't know what I was doing. I even sent Libby to daycare. I told her one time, in a onesie, like, that buttons up, and I put her in her, like, car seat with the little thing that zippered up because it's winter. And I thought that's how you dress the baby. Like, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know any different. Dropped her off at daycare. Daycare calls me at work, and they're like, you forgot to dress your kid. And I'm like, oh, geez, I'm just tired, blah, blah, blah. Hung up the phone and cried. I'm like, I can't even dress my baby. Yeah, so, I had postpartum depression like nobody's business. It was crazy. And then I felt guilty for having postpartum depression because here I am, a child of God, who has been blessed with not just 1 but 2 children. And I can't stand it. Like, I couldn't stand being home with them alone. I couldn't stand being in my own skin. I was hopeless. Like, first of all, I felt like I wasn't equipped to do it. I felt like I was overwhelmed, and then I felt guilt on top of it.
I'm not supposed to feel this way.
Yeah, which is super helpful, right?
Yeah.
So we decide, Kevin and I, that we're going to move back home to Williamsport where I'm from, because, you know, we'll have a support system there. And we have these two babies that we need help. And we want them to grow up and know their Grammy and Pop-Up, and we want them to know their cousins and play with them,
Yeah,
yada, 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 yada. So we decide, pretty much on a whim, this is a good idea and we're going to move home, right? So we pack all of our crap up and we move to Newberry, which I didn't know at the time is, you know, the place that we were in wasn't a super great neighborhood. And we took really a 75% pay cut. And the cost of living here is not a great deal cheaper than it is in Lancaster.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were in trouble. Like, Kevin found a job. I didn't find anything, and I certainly didn't want to be at home with the kids. But we had made the decision that it made sense financially, because to pay for daycare for two babies, I might as well, you know, just hand my check over, basically. Postpartum depression got worse. My sister invited me to her church at Faith, and I got involved in the worship team right away. So I started to have some semblance of who I was again, which was great. But I was still like, my old counselor Jeff used to say, in the basement digging holes, because that was definitely where I was. I was crying every day. I was losing my temper at the drop of a hat. I was at the end of my rope. Kevin and I's marriage was falling apart. We didn't even know who we were as a couple anymore. Besides the fact that these kids, doggy, they tag teamed us. I mean, I can't
imagine. Well, what's the age difference?
17 months. So, and when we brought Josiah home, he had undiagnosed food allergies. His belly was distended. Its belly button was popped out. They thought it was herniated. He didn't sleep ever. Like, his brain just did not shut off. We found out years later that it's because of the cocaine use that was done while he was in utero, that, you know, his brain just doesn't shut off, you know? But when he would, and he probably still could stay up for 23 hours, crash for an hour, and be good. Yeah. And he did as a toddler. That's all
Goodness.
He wouldn't nap. He wouldn't sleep at night. He was sick all the time. He would walk down the hallway and just, you know, throw up and keep walking. He was like gray. And I took him to the pediatrician. I'm like, okay, this one won't stop pooping and this one won't ever go. And of course, the pediatrician looks at me and he's like, hey, you're a new mom. Stop, you know, being so... Yeah. Anyways, so like I was exhausted on all ends, and I finally broke and asked for help, which I've never been good at.
So about like how long of a time period till I guess this point?
We were probably in Newberry for like maybe 5 or 6 months until I finally went. I'm at the end of me.
Yeah.
I've prayed all I can pray. I have done everything I could think of. And I still feel like this. I still feel hopeless and devoid of joy and nothing. I mean, here I am with like these two fantastic, adorable children, and I can't find anything to smile about. You know, I used to make music. I used to make art. Like nothing made me excited about life anymore. I was just living in this really, really dark place. And finally decided that I was gonna see a therapist. It was against my better judgment because of the situation that I had gone through. I thought for sure that all therapy is somebody telling you that everything was your fault. And it's so not what I thought it was. I got into it and I guess I was afraid that he would just sit there and go, well, you're depressed because you don't have enough faith and you're stressed out because you don't pray enough. Yeah. You know, all the stuff that everybody else has told me. You know, why are you so sad? And you can't, when you're depressed, you can't give a reason. It's not like, oh, my dog died. Like, there is no like logical, that part of your brain is broke, you know? So I walked in and I knew I was in the right place because not for 1 second did I feel like he was looking at me and going, boy, She is messed up, and it's all her fault.
Yeah.
You know, when he had compassion and empathy and said, well, of course you're stressed out. Look at what you're dealing with. I was like, wait, what? Did you just give me permission to feel this way?
Yeah.
Like, you mean I can feel this way and not feel guilty and still love Jesus? Really? Like, it boggled my mind. Like, seriously. And so he's like, I think you need to talk to your doctor about antidepressants. And that was the next hurdle, because I thought for sure taking antidepressants was like, you know, only crazy people did that. Consider me crazy. So the next battle was just finding the right medicine for me. And that is a battle. Like, honest to God, if you get diagnosed with any sort of mental illness and have to go through the jumping of the hoops through medicine, stick with it. And then when I finally did find the right medicine for me, I would think, okay, God's cured me because I feel better.
Yeah.
So I'll stop taking the medicine. Yeah. Not healthy, not helpful, not productive. So I finally, years later got to a place where I'm okay with the fact that I need to take medicine. It's no different than me needing glasses to see. But that started to help. After I got some help, things were progressing. We're doing okay. And then I got diagnosed with cancer. And funny thing, when you're diagnosed with thyroid cancer, everybody looks at you and goes, well, thank God it's thyroid cancer. That's the best kind you can get. And it's kind of crappy, because it's not that I'm not thankful that I don't have pancreatic cancer. It's that somebody has told me I have the C word, and now I have to deal with it with a smile on my face because it's the really good kind.
It's not as bad.
Yeah. Like, oh, you're only going to lose your pinky.
Yeah.
Which, yes, I did get surgery. They took it all out. I got radiation treatment. It's gravy. I've been cancer-free now for 10 years.
Sick.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Yes. Praise God. It got diagnosed by an absolute fluke. I was having a physical for a job that I ended up hating and quitting after 2 weeks. Yeah, and the doctor felt around. He's like, you have a nodule on your thyroid. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, well, you should check it out with your doctor. And I said, sure, okay. I thought it was, you get those little lumps in front of your ear.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, it'll dissolve. And it was about a month later, and I was at the doctor. I was like, oh, yeah, by the way, And he goes, well, let me check. He goes, I don't feel anything. I said, well, I figured it wasn't anything. He goes, no. I don't have very sensitive fingers, like when it comes to like finding lumps and stuff. So I'm going to send you to get checked. I'm like, that's not necessary. It's fine. I was totally convinced that this other guy was full of it.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, I'm going in for a biopsy. I'm like, no, this isn't supposed to happen. And it's the day after Christmas. It was a Friday. And I was at the job that I hated. I called the doctor and I said to the PA, or to the lady that answered the phone, I go, okay, so I had this biopsy and I'm just calling to, I'm just calling right now so that you can tell me everything is okay, because I just want to have a good weekend. And the next thing I hear is, can you hang on? I got to get the doctor. I'm like, oh my goodness. I won't say what I said, but I was like, oh crap, I'm in trouble. And so the PA gets on and she's like, unfortunately it came back as papillary carcinoma. And like everything after that was like noise. I'm like, okay, like I went to the bathroom and I cried. That it rocked my world. Like, there's just, if I had any idea what I'd go through for the next 10 years, honestly, it was peanuts. But, like, just having that out, like, your thyroid controls so much.
Yeah.
I have no internal temperature gauge. Like, right now, I feel like I'm in a sauna.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, like, it regulates your hormones. It regulates, it determines, like, all kinds of stuff. It can cause depression and anxiety and all kinds of crazy stuff. So anyways, I went through that. That was just trying time, because probably the closest I had felt to God up to that point, though, because I felt like he was right there with me. I really did. Kevin and I started having, marriage problems again, the more Joe got into school, the more he was either getting bullied by teachers for having attention issues or bullied by kids because he was so tiny, and he was always acting out, and he started suffering from depression and being in and out of mental hospitals and emergency rooms because of, he tried to kill himself for the first time when he was 9. And
Wow.
that's when your kid comes to you and tells you at 9 years old that he has no desire to live anymore. That's a pain that, as a parent, I hope to God nobody ever hears that from their kid, And he's gonna be 15 in August. He has been in a treatment facility for about a year and a half now. And he has taken responsibility for his life and his choices in a way that I don't see most of men, like adult men, doing.
Yeah.
He's gone through a 12-step program. He takes classes and leads groups now for anger management and dealing with attention deficit and dealing with abandonment issues and reactive attachment disorder from being adopted. And, seeing the growth in him is, if anything can teach you about how God loves you, it's being a parent. Because you have this little being that you're in charge of, and when they really, really mess up, and you still love them just as much. I remember sitting in a session where Joe had to, kind of like a confession time with me, where he had to sit down and read to me in detail the things that he had done, and I just had to kind of soak it all in. And on my way home I started crying because I thought for just a fraction of a second I was talking to God, and I'm like, is that how you really feel about me? Like, all this crap.
But it hasn't changed the way that you love him.
You still
Yeah.
love me.
Yeah.
You still look at me the same. Like, it didn't change the fact that he's still my little boy.
Yeah.
That I love him with all of my heart, and that I would do anything for him. And he confessed to some pretty raw stuff that I didn't think I'd ever hear from my son. And the fact that I could still look at him and still love him, I had to pull over because I was just, I was so overwhelmed, I was so overwhelmed that, if I love him this much, if I would literally lay down my life, no matter what he has done in the past, if I would literally just say, hey, without thought, take me and save him. Like, if I feel that way about my kid and I am merely human, that's what finally did it for me. Because, I stepped into City Church like 2 years ago, and I did it because I was invited by my cousin, and I knew that he would keep asking until I went. So I was like, okay, guys, I'll go. And so I went and I sat in the service, and I remember Raphael saying how good God was and how much he loves us, and saying all these good, fluffy, good things that make you feel good, but except it wasn't touching me at all. It didn't. It was just bouncing off because I was just so hard-hearted. And finally, at the end of the service, I said, God, if you're really as good as you say, like, if you're really as forgiving, if you really, really love me as much as he keeps saying that you love me, show me, because I don't see the good. All I see is you torturing me. That's all I see, after, dealing with depression, not only in me, but in both of my children, and cancer and divorce and, just trauma upon tragedy and, all that stuff. And I still feel God's love. And there are days when there's still days when I question, why am I here? Or what's the purpose of me having gone through this stuff? And without fail, every time, he answers me. Every time I come across somebody, whether it's a stranger at the Dollar Tree like last week and we stood in the rain and talked, and she shared with me stuff that I don't think she'd probably shared with anyone because it was deep and dark. And I was able to share with her that, hey, I've been there. I've been through, sexual trauma, and I've been through assault and rape, and I've been through all these manner of things, and they did not destroy me, And it's not because of who I am. I'm not this great person who can overcome all these obstacles on my own. God, over and over again, has shown me that he loves me just by letting me survive. And by bringing people into my life that I can say, I might not know exactly where you're coming from, but here's what I've been through, and I know that there's light on the other side. I know that God loves you no matter where you've been, what you've done, or what's been done to you. No matter who has told you that you're not worthy. No matter who has abandoned you or left you. I know for certain, without fail, God is there. And if you ask him, if you say, look, I don't believe this, please show me, he will. He loves you. He loves us that much that he's willing to take the time to show you, an individual, just how much he's willing to just love on you. Sorry, I don't know where that came from. I feel a weepy now.
And that's like beautiful.
Thank you. God is good.
He is.
Whew.
And like it's kind of like, I feel like what Paul talks about, the scripture everyone uses where it's like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But like he's more or less talking about like how to have contentment and rest in Christ, like no matter what your situation or circumstance is, like your situations or your circumstances don't determine your value.
Absolutely.
And like I think that's something beautiful that the Lord showed you through all the pain and trauma that you've been through, is that stuff doesn't define who you are, nor does it define his love for you.
Right.
And like I think that's so very important.
Absolutely.
Is not to forget that.
Absolutely.
That we're so much more than our trials or circumstances.
Yeah. And that's something that, being a mom of an adopted person, that, you as a child of Christ are adopted into his family. And again, like, it's one of those things that God knows what kind of learner I am. He knows that I'm visual, I'm tactile. Like I need these things to understand. And I think that one of the reasons that Josiah and I now are family is because it's just one more way that God is showing me this is the kind of love that I have for you. Like I took you out of where you were, and what happened to you, like you were saying, what happened to you and what has happened because of you, like all those, you are not defined by where you've come from, And that's something that as an adoptive mom, like I've been telling Joe over and over again since he was tiny, I am your mama. I love you no matter what. You are my son. You may not have come out of my belly, but you were born right in my heart. There's just, and I always tell him the same thing, and he smiles every time I say it. I say, Josiah, you're my favorite son. And he always says, Mom, I'm your only son. And my reply is always, well, that you know of, which makes him giggle. And so, it's one more thing just that God uses to say, hey, I know you need these things to learn. So instead of a 2x4, this is what I'll do. But you're so right. You're just, and watching him sometimes struggle with that pain and that hurt of being abandoned and of being, he has to deal with the pain of being abandoned, but he also has to deal with the pain that his mom wasn't willing to give up drugs for
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and he also has to deal with the fact that he was neglected, and what a big hole in his heart that must be. That, you know, to continually remind him scripturally and verbally that that's not who you are.
Yeah.
You're not discarded. You know.
Speaking the truth despite how he feels. You
Yeah.
know, like,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a big thing in our house. Like, you know, feelings lie.
yeah.
But if you
They
need
do.
reminded of the truth, come to me and I'll tell you. I'll remind you. You know, and we do that for each other. You know, I think that's you know, I have a hard time saying I'm a good mom because if I don't want to be like, yeah, I'm awesome. You know, if you know me good enough, I'm usually tooting my own horn anyways. But usually it's in jest. And but I think that's one thing that in our little community in our home that we try to remind each other of what the truth is. You know. So in that part, I think I'm doing okay.
I did want to kind of like touch
Yeah.
on the fact that, I mean, since I've known you, like, I mean, I've seen you as a very joyful person, and as someone who really gives a crap about your kids, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I didn't know any of like the backstory of pretty much any of that, but yeah. So I guess like what's been the shift in you coming from a point of, I guess like, yeah, dreading like the mom part,
Yeah.
to really embracing that, and I don't know, really
yeah.
just being involved with the kids.
I've always loved them, but I have not always enjoyed being a mom. I think up till the point, and this is something I've even shared with Libby, because she's in the other room. I'm sure she's listening. I didn't really.
She just waved, so I think that's a yes.
I think that's a yes. I did not enjoy being a mom, I think, for a couple reasons. First of all, I didn't know what I was doing. And I've always been one of those people who has a hard time asking for help. And I really needed to ask another mom who knew what she was doing to come alongside of me and help me.
Yeah.
And I was too embarrassed and too prideful to do that. I think another reason is postpartum depression. Postpartum depression lies to you and continually tells you you're not good enough because you're not good enough. Period.
It's just vicious cycle.
It
I'm
is.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Beating
yeah.
yourself over.
Yeah.
Over feeling that way. I'm sure too.
Exactly. And then, you know, feeling that way, then beating yourself about feeling that way,
Yeah, yeah.
having guilt about feeling. Yeah, it's a vicious cycle. And unless you talk to somebody who knows the truth about you as a person,
Yeah.
you're going to continue to feel that way.
Mm.
And that was something that Jeff, my first counselor, did for me, is he told me truths about me, and he had me look them up, you know, in scripture, telling, you know, and at the time I didn't get it, really. Like, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm worthy of asking for help. You know, it's just kind of like, you know, parroting it, and I know he knew that. But once, whew, okay, so when my daughter turned 5, I think was like the pinnacle of my depression. And I didn't know why. I kept having these weird dreams that I talked to my therapist about. And basically, the short end of the real long story is that that's when I was first sexually abused at her age.
Oh.
And I was having anxiety. Like, I didn't even want to leave the house with my kids. You know, I didn't want what happened to me to happen to them. So I had to come to terms with something that I had never really even talked about to anybody up till that point, and I had to deal with a lot of dark places in my own mind. I think after I accepted why I was the way like why I was feeling that way, I think after I started sharing my story, and giving what I call little Crystal, or, you know, little me, the opportunity for somebody to grieve for me during that time was very healing. If you have somebody who's gone through something tragic or horrific or whatever, taking the time to just sit with them and let them know, not that you pity them, but that you're grieving with them, to let them know that you see them and that you validate the way that they feel, that can be so healing for that person. Because when you go through something like that, even though I knew I was 5 and it wasn't my fault, like logically I could piece that together. Yeah. Like, duh, it's not my fault. Until I had a 5-year-old and I thought, if somebody did something to her like that, I would kill them. Yeah. That's your first reaction. Your second reaction is, would you ever sit there and stare at her and go, you know, this was your fault, right? Mm-hmm. You can't even fathom it, right? I mean, you can't even fathom looking at your child and saying, well, if you wouldn't have done X, Y, Z, this would happen. No. Like, no, not in a million years. But until my therapist sat there and said to me, would you look at your daughter and tell her that you blame her for this? I was like, no. Like, I was like flabbergasted that he even brought that up. I was like, no, why would you even ask me? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I realized why he said that was, there's no difference between me at 5 and my daughter at 5. You know? No difference. Like, there's no culpability that a 5-year-old can take in that situation.
Yeah.
Right. So it finally put me in a place where I was able to forgive myself that I didn't even know that I had to, you know? Once I started dealing with my own stuff, and after I got on a good medical regimen, and I was going to therapy on a weekly basis, and I was taking care of myself, I was able to figure out who I was and how to be a good parent. I started to see why I was Joe and Libby's parents. Mm-hmm. Like, I started to see, like, there was a mission for me there. Like, that was a calling for me. It wasn't just, I'm the one who wakes you up, dresses you, feeds you, puts you down for a nap, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. They started to develop little personalities at around 4 or 5 years old. And at that point, I started going, okay, this is kind of fun. Like, I kind of enjoy this now. Mm-hmm. At that point, I started to actually enjoy being a mom and taking pride in it. Like, I may not be able to go out and earn, $50,000 a year doing XYZ, but if I can make little humans that don't grow up to be butts, that are good people, mm-hmm. I want to do that. Like, the world needs more good people. The world needs more people who love on people. The world needs more Christians who just love, that don't judge, that don't, bash people, that don't, place their rules on other people that never ascribed to them in the first place. Mm-hmm. Like, if I can have a hand in making the world a little bit better through my kids.
Started to see like real purpose and mission in parenting, like in a way that you hadn't previously.
When my dad got sick in 2013, and with lung cancer, and he went pretty quickly. When I started thinking about the legacy that he left, the kind of man that he was, and how he loved Jesus, and how he, like the last day that he was alive, before we moved him into hospice, because he died in hospice the first day we moved him in.
Oh, wow.
I remember sitting there next to his bed, and he was staring at the clock, and he had this big smile on his face. And I was like, "You all right over there?" He's like, "Yeah, they're just waiting for me." And I thought, in that moment, I'm like, okay, the cancer spread to the brain, and he's having, hallucinations or whatever. And I just blew it off. Later that day after he passed away, I was like, oh, they were waiting for you. Like, hello. But my dad and I have always been really close. And he got saved when I was about 13. And
was this all kind of trickle down effect with your sister?
yes, he got
Yeah,
saved
okay.
at the church that we started going to, with my neighbors across the street, the Parises, and so after they moved, my dad started taking us, and then he got involved, and I remember the last service that the Parises were there, my dad got saved, and he had always believed there was a God. He always, he was always a God-fearing man, I guess you could say, and he's always been a good guy. But after he came to know Christ, there was a definite change in him. He was always known for his temper. All us birds are, but he started to. I don't know how to explain it. He just there was an air about him. It just changed. I mean, him and mom still bickered like crazy because that's what they did. And, but I don't know, there's just a peace, like a gentle peace there. And to watch him with his grandkids, it was just like the first time he met Joe, you would never guess it was the first time he met him. Because just the look in his eye was like, hey, there's my grandkid, It was just beautiful. Like it was, and him and Joe had like this connection like no other. And after finding out how my dad grew up and how, he was just kind of left out and went through his mom's abusive boyfriends and, knocking him around and, getting in between him and his mom. After I learned all that, it kind of made more sense that, him and Joe just had this soul connection. Mm-hmm. And so after my dad passed, it really dawned on me what an impact a parent can have. Because I guess before that, I was staring at this like tiny little minute piece, and then all of a sudden I got this big picture of what I'm doing. Mm. And it's a little overwhelming when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, that your kid's going to have kids who have kids who have kids who have kids. And, they're going to think back to Grandpa Josh and, Grandma Crystal, and there's going to be stories ranging anywhere from, me being some kooky tattooed grandma lady, to hopefully I remember when, my mom used to pray with me, and, I want my kids to think about me how I think about my dad.
Mm-hmm.
I know that my dad had a special relationship with Christ, and I know that when he closed his eyes in that room for the final time, that he saw Jesus. Like, so, and I know that my dad went through some real crap. I mean, not just with his health, but just as a person.
Life.
Yeah, and it never changed the way he treated people. He was always the person who would, give you a lift to go get gas, or stranger or not, or, if somebody would break down the street and they come to our house, come on in, have a cup of coffee and relax. You can call somebody if you need to, blah, blah, blah. He's just, my mom's the same way, just open and loving. And it's what I think that church is supposed to be. Like, church isn't always in a building, that, it's where you meet people's needs, where you meet them where they're at, where you have a conversation with them, and you touch souls. Like, that's church.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the building and seeing the people and hugging on people, and, and singing the songs, that's good. I mean, there are times,
place.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And there are times that I'll go and I'll just be like, oh, I needed that so much, But like, lately for me, I haven't really been involved in church much. And I know it's confusing for the people that love me that are there. They're like, where are you? Where have you gone? And I think right now that it's not that I don't want to be there. It's that I only have so much energy. And there's so many things right now that are pulling me. And I don't think that I'm stepping away from God and by not being there right now. But like, with my mom is passing away, and, there's responsibilities there. My son is getting ready to integrate to being back home.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah, within the next couple months, him, and
Nice.
it's really something to look forward to, and I'm excited about it, but there's a lot to do before that happens. There's, you know, things with the relationships going on. There's just, it seems to be like so many like plates that I'm spinning, and I do take time out and I just worship and be with Christ, and I am so blessed to have friends that come over and just fellowship with me and meet me where I'm at.
Yeah.
You know, that like my friend Lauren came over last week, and she just loved me. She said, you know, I miss you, but I'm not putting a burden on you to like, please come back to church on Sunday. You know, she said, I just want to let you know that you're missed and you're loved, and that you need to do what you need to do. And you know, if it's better for me to come over here or whatever, you know, because even though I'm on medicine and all this stuff, besides all the other crap that's going on in life, there is definite social anxiety that's still there.
Yeah.
You know, and my health hasn't been super, so it's a scary thing to think about putting myself in a group full of a couple hundred people, and you know, like, you know, and I love my pastor, but he makes us all hold hands at the end of service when he says his thing, right? And dude, and every time I'm like, Raph, it's flu season, I ain't holding nobody's hand, and then
That's
I end
too
up
funny.
yeah, and then I end up holding everybody's hand, but you know, there's just like so. And I'm not making excuses for not being there. I think I'm doing the right thing for me right now, but this to me is church. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sharing life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be a sanctuary or a building, or, you know, like you said, those things have their place too. But yeah, I just I don't know. I'm all verklempt. Sorry.
You're good.
Whew. Yeah. So yeah, I think the biggest shift in me is, you know, like I said, after my dad passed, and I realized what a big impact I could have. And you will have an impact as a parent, whether you're trying to be a good impact or a bad impact.
Yeah.
That is something I definitely noticed, like with my parents. They both come from broken homes, broken, abusive, alcoholic homes.
Yeah.
You know, and they came together and stayed married for 54 years. And it was a functioning, healthy family. I mean, we all had our issues, but for the most part, I mean, they did real good for where they came from.
Yeah.
You know, they broke that mold. They broke, you know, because that doesn't happen in every family. You know, a lot of the times you see things repeat over and over again.
That's insane. I mean, just, I don't know, I guess kind of backtracking entirely, just like that. I don't know. So much of the transformation in your life and your family's life, like, came from a guitar teacher, you know?
Yeah.
You know, like,
Right.
just to see, like, one person's impact, you know?
It's like that ripple effect. Yeah.
That's you know, that's just insane. Just to, like, not to get caught up in, but, like, you know, like, what if, you know, like, you know, it could have been that, like, your parents and the whole way that you were raised and the way that you raise your own kids is just like, how they were brought up, you know, and like how things would, you know, could have been horribly different. You know?
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember talking to my dad about, I asked him, I think I was like 14 or something like that. Still kind of a, you know, teenager. And I asked him why he had the lump in his nose. Because he had like this very prominent like lump right here in his nose. And I was like, why do you have a lump in your nose and I don't? You know, we were studying chromosomes and all that happy crap and sinus, which is like science but different.
Sinus class.
Sinus class. Anyways, and he said it's not like a biological thing. It was broken. I was like, no way, you broke your nose? And he was like, well, I didn't break my nose. Turns out that he was like 14, about the same age as me. And his mom's boyfriend was drunk and beating on his mom. And my dad stepped in between them.
Wow.
And my dad was like the runt of the family. He was kind of tiny. He said this guy, Leroy, wrapped his belt buckle around his fist and pelted him in the face. And I was just like, I was in shock that he said it so matter-of-factly, like it was like nothing. And I put myself in his shoes for like just a half a second, you know, because we're not very empathetic as teenagers. And I was like, I pictured my dad hitting me. And I always had that like fear of God thing about my dad, like because he was bigger than me and his deep voice and he could get real loud when he wanted to. And like this is a tattoo of his hand. So he had like these big bare hands, right? So he could have like taken me out in one fell swoop. And it hurt my heart so bad to even think about him touching me like that, like in anger, that I just started crying. I was like, Daddy, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And he goes, yeah, it is what it is. And, you know, of course, this is like when his dad passed away, who was a total butt, by the way. His dad was just, he was not a dad.
Yeah.
And when it came time for his dad to pass away, I remember my dad going to his hospital bed and telling me he forgave him.
Well.
Yeah. And that, and I was like, how can you forgive him? Like, he was so rotten to you. And, you know, years later when I had to go through my, you know, when I had to go through my trauma in therapy and think about the word forgiveness for the person that had wronged me, the first time I thought about it, I was like nauseous. Like, there's no way I'm ever forgiving him.
Yeah.
But when you forgive somebody, then you realize it's more about you and letting go and having peace than it is anything about the person.
Yeah, and that it's not. Yeah, it's not saying that it wasn't a big deal. It's acknowledging that it was a big deal.
Absolutely,
you know? Yeah.
absolutely. So it's, I mean, he was a very good man, and there's not one time that I'll run into somebody that'll be like, oh, you're Dick Bird's daughter. Oh God, he's such a good guy. I loved him so much, and you know, he was always, you know, blah blah blah. Like nobody has ever said anything bad about my dad.
Yeah.
I want that. I want to be that. Like I don't want to ever give anybody any reason to be like, I think, you know, she was mean to me, or you know. There's a place to be mean too.
Yeah.
I was at Walmart the other day. But you know, 9 times out of 10, I'll go back and apologize.
Walmart's the place to be mean.
Oh my God. Yeah, it was rough. But yeah. Just taking that time, I think, when you're interacting with anybody, taking the time to think, how is this going to affect this person? Like, it takes a lot of energy. And especially as a parent, when your kids are getting older and, you know, they're starting to spout off to you like they're grown. And, you know, the first thing you want to do is backhand them, but yeah, that's not healthy. Just, you know, taking a second and being like, where is this coming from? Because you got to remind yourself, my kid's not a bad kid. They're having a day. Kids have days, you know? And I think if we can be that way with each other as humans, that would be pretty cool. I think the world would be a little better that way, but I am definitely, I'm good at it with my kids. That's about it. I fail to have that much patience with anybody else on earth, but so, yeah.
Good deal.
That's something.
Calvin, you're on your side.
I lost you guys in the video. So this is like a picture of Josh's face smiling at me. But I can like.
Oh, that's actually just what I'm doing. I put my face right in front of the camera and I'm just sitting there, just staring.
Bro's like in real time. Yeah, that's like that's so powerful. Like even like for me, like there's been a closeness even to me and my own mother's relationship where like she's sharing stories like your dad was with you about how life was when they were younger and like how much of that plays into like their character, who they become, and like this like it's so beautiful to know that someplace like your relationship with your parent, like they'll always be your parent, but it transitions from like friendship like after a certain point where you genuinely become friends with that person, like, and you see them as like a son or daughter of God as well as mom and dad, you know.
Absolutely.
And like that's for me is like our relationship has gotten beautiful since that place where like we can actually confide in each other, and like my mom doesn't feel like she could tell me something and I'll be surprised or judge her. You know, she knows that I love her, and she knows that like she's an amazing parent and she did the best she could with what she had, and like I don't hold any of that stuff against her, you know. And like for her to know that, and we can have that type of openness, like that's like for me like where the relationship really gets real. And that's awesome that you and your dad share that.
Absolutely. And I think every adult child comes to a point where they realize that their mom or dad made mistakes. You
Yeah.
know, you come to a point where you're like, not sure I would handle that the same way.
Yeah,
and, you know, and whether it be like, for me, my dad had a temper and my mom was pretty emotionally distant. That's the worst I can say about them. You know, I mean, I grew up in a pretty I had a good home life. And I know not a lot of people can say that. But, that made it hard for me, as well as being, a Christian and feeling guilty about everything. When I was young, I'll get to that in a second. But, no, there came a time where I had to sit down with each of my parents. I didn't have to, but I chose to, and say, these are the things that you had done that hurt me, that I don't think were very healthy, but I forgive you for them, because I realize now that you're not just my parent, you're an actual human being that makes mistakes. And you at the time were under this, that, or the other pressure. And I think, like you said, Calvin, it opened that door to another change in the relationship, because I think if you're able to have that conversation with your parent, do it. If they're willing, capable, however that works. Because I think it's vital in that shift to having an adult relationship with your parents. Because when you just continually kind of push those things aside, and you just expect your parents to be, well, they're perfect because they're your parents.
Yeah.
You'll be continually continually disappointed, and they'll be
And repeat the same mistakes that you're not considering mistakes. Gonna repeat mistakes anyway, but
right,
at
absolutely.
least acknowledging some of them as like I don't want to go that same route.
Right. And I just want to touch on guilt for a second, because I've said that several times, and I think I'm not blaming a certain sect of Christianity or anything like that, but I spent a lot of my formative years in the Nazarene Church, and which is a holiness church. A lot of things are looked at as black or white. There's no in between there. And the way that I interpreted that, and this is taking the fault off of anybody who was a minister to me at that time, but the way I chose to interpret that, was that you're either good or you're bad, period. You're either, that there is no, and I'm not saying gray area as far as, sin is sin, understood, but you have to be a certain way to be accepted as a Christian, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if you aren't, well, then you need to fix yourself. Like, you need to get right. But I grew up always having guilt about something. Either what I had done, or things I was thinking, or how I was acting, or depression. That was a huge amount of guilt, because I thought there must be something I'm not getting right in my spiritual life if I'm this sad all the time. Because you're always talking in church, talking about, well, joy is Jesus, and then others, and yourself, and if that's the way you operate, you should have joy all the time. And which is, kind of a big pile of hooey, because I don't see people in the Bible that were happy all the time. I mean, Jesus knew happiness and laughter and extreme sorrow, and giving yourself the space and the permission to feel that feelings themselves, emotions, are not wrong, was something that took me a long time. Like a long time. And I'm finally at a place where mostly the feelings and emotions that I have, I don't judge myself for. And I have noticed from, like, the typical high school teenage Christian who, where I was at was, well, if I make everybody think everything's okay on the outside, then they won't question God. Like, I had this feeling like I was the one upholding God and His holiness. Like, if I mess up, then they won't. It'll all come crashing down,
Yeah.
and they'll be like, "Oh, well, if she believes in God, like, I don't want to believe in that God. Holy poop! Like, did I have a, delusions of grandeur? Because like, I didn't realize that the more honest and open, and just about all the crap that I've had to deal with or the way I'm feeling, the more God can shine through that. He uses my weaknesses to minister to people, because people have come up to me and been like, I have been there too, and I thought that made me a bad Christian. It's, I wish we could get rid of the words bad Christian.
Yeah.
Or that's not very Christian of you. Oh my gosh, if I had a nickel for every time I heard that.
Yeah.
Whew. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, you and your facial piercings. Come on now. That ain't very Christian of you.
I know, right? How dare I be different?
Right? I think we need to hook Josh up with some facial piercing. What do you think?
I don't know. I think I'm good.
Um,
Never been my thing.
I do not like pain. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Definitely a matter of preference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
One thing that I've just been getting around in like the last year, especially, was like the whole like Jesus teaching like on Beatitudes, but for blessed are those who mourn, for they'll be comforted.
Yes.
For the longest time, I don't know. I just read that and it was like, oh yeah, like Jesus comforts, know. But it's I think the big thing, like, I don't know, if we're going around like acting as though, or seeing that we should be happy, like we miss out on his comfort, you know what I mean, like and I don't know, like it really like breaks my heart for people that either like grew up in households where like emotions were kind of subdued, or or guys that weren't like allowed to cry, that type of attitude, just because it's like, I don't know, a lot of time that carries into adulthood, and people that come to a point that just like there's just like such a heavy burden on them. You can just tell like that they're just like walking around with a lot of weight. And then it's like, I mean, you something in you is mourning, like
and it will come out.
Yeah.
Whether it's
and
tears or screaming
or being numb, to the point that you never get that, you never get to a point that you can receive.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, when I said my friend Lauren had come over last week, I could have very easily been like, no, I'm fine, I'm good. And she wouldn't have believed it, but she would have respected my space, until I was ready to talk. But it would have been very, very easy and simple and not messy to say, I'm good, everything's okay, I'm holding my stuff together.
Yeah.
But I wasn't, and I wasn't okay, and I was freaking out about a lot of things, like, what am I going to do when Joe gets out? Where's he going to do? And blah, blah, blah. There's just so many things to think about. And I was just overwhelmed at the thought of all of them together, because that's how my brain works. It's either all or nothing. Everything in my life is all or nothing. So the floodgates opened and everything came out. And it gave her the opportunity to let me know that she saw me and she validated how I was feeling, and she ministered directly to my heart. I mean, and that's exactly why she was there. I know God sent her. There's no doubt in my mind. And so it will come out, it'll come out whether healthy or unhealthy. It does present itself. But I think that's why, like, if you're really overwhelmed with sadness and you need to talk to somebody, I absolutely would recommend, getting into therapy. And don't be afraid to if you don't connect with that person, to find somebody else. You're not like locked in. You know, if you're you know, even if you're lucky enough to have friends that you can confide in. I've been in therapy now for like 12 years. Yeah, I think it's about 12 years now. Pretty solid. I'm a firm believer everybody would benefit from it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just, you have to get it out, and it may not come out. You may not cry about it, but I think when things are banging around in your head, that it makes you anxious and sad.
Mm-hmm.
And God did not mean for you to, wander around dredging and just merely existing.
Yeah.
Because although
Yeah.
my life is not what I would have necessarily pictured it being, I got married because I thought it was going to be forever,
Mm-hmm.
And after being married for 17 years, I didn't, I never thought for a second that my marriage would end in divorce. I never thought for a second that my son would, end up having to be away from me for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's things that have happened that I never would have guessed would have happened, and things that make me really sad. However, I'm capable of still maintaining life, and that's something I couldn't say about myself 10 or 12 years ago. I just couldn't deal, period. So, yeah. God is good, and God does heal. I think
He does.
uses doctors and medicine and therapy and yoga and exercise and fresh air, and God heals. He does. And sometimes it's through divine intervention, and sometimes it's just through who he sends in your path to help you, because I really do feel like I'm not depressed right now. That to me is healing.
Yeah.
So what if I have to be on medicine and talk to a therapist once a week? It feels good to do that, to take care of myself so that I can be around for my kid. Because I promise you, if I hadn't done that 10 or 12 years ago, I would not be here right now. And if I wasn't here, I wouldn't be able to help my kids.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to be here so that Libby can talk about this, that, or the other thing, or so that I could look my son in the eye and tell him I do know what it's like to sit there and not want to live anymore. And so that he knows that he can talk to me and trust me. Because, like I said, I grew up in a good house with good, loving parents, but they did not know anything about depression. I know that I've had depression since I was 12. Like, I know that now, looking back. And the first time I tried to kill myself, I was 13. And my dad said, well, don't do that again. That was his answer. When my kid told me, I got him into therapy. I did this, that, and the other thing. Does that make me a better person or a better parent? No, I did what I knew I needed to do.
Yeah.
Because I'd been through it.
Yeah.
And when years and years and years later, when my dad's in his 60s, he's talking to me about just not wanting to play the guitar anymore, and he doesn't want to do this anymore, and I just can't find it in me to go out in the garage and tinker around anymore. And I'm like, Dad, I think you're depressed. No, I'm not depressed, And I was able to share with him that it's not a character flaw.
Yeah.
It's not a failure on your part. It's not a lack of faith. It's a chemical imbalance, And it took a bit of convincing, but he was able to then, find a way to get onto antidepressants and feel better. So God had me go through these things for a reason, I didn't like him at the time, but God's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for being just raw and open and real.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know. I mean, it encourages me, and challenges me to be more open and real and raw.
I have been called challenging, for sure. Just kidding.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm just
That's
trusting.
awesome, though.
Yeah. I'm trusting that, I don't know, I'm trusting that even just sharing your story will connect with somebody, in a way that, even if it causes someone to consider counseling,
for sure.
who didn't before, that's
I'm
huge.
Definitely I'm a huge advocate of helping anyone through any kind of mental illness situation that they're going through. If I can point you in the right direction, reach out. Because if you don't feel comfortable calling a hotline and you want to talk, message me. Because I am this way because I know how it feels to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
I know how it feels to feel like you're the only Christian who's suffering like this. To feel like the only person, like you can't talk to anybody because everyone in your faith circle or your friend circle is saying, well, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah,
Just like slap a smile on, fake it till you make it. Those things don't work. They don't work. And if they do work, you're not depressed. You're sad. There's a difference. If you can pull yourself out of it and be okay, great. If you can't, there's people there to help. So I appreciate you letting me tell my story. And I've been talking to God about this for the last week because I don't know. I know something good will come out of it because that's what he's laid on my heart. So he's always faithful.
Yeah.
Whether I am or not.
Yeah, for sure. Were you going to say something, Kel?
Nah, I mean, dude, I'm like kind of just speechless. Like, Crystal, your story and like literally everything you just said is like literally everything I've been needing to hear. Like, it's really cool to know that like I'm still learning. Like, I'm not always the best with my emotions, as much as I like to think that I am. I'm not. And I'm kind of just, I guess, growing to, explain how I feel about certain things. And to know the difference between, like, my feelings trying to tell me how to feel rather than my feelings telling me where to go. Which that's been something I've been kind of mulling over. Like, even though I may feel a certain way, that's who I am. But it's meant for me to have that comfort, Josh, that you were talking about, where like the Lord steps in and he meets us in like, I guess like the sadness in the moments where those things hit, to be uplifted and to be made new, and to be healed through, like, because coping and healing aren't the same,
Right.
Oh,
absolutely.
they're definitely different. And I love like literally everything she said about that. Like, that's like so spot on. Like, thank you for just sharing your heart, being so real and 100% with it. And like, you're my type of people. I like real, genuine people. Like, thank you so much for just being you.
Thank you.
I can't see you, but I'm on the other side of this black screen.
Oh yeah, that's because
just like eternally touched.
I'm still just standing in front of the camera. Still.
It's really just a cardboard
smiling.
cutout of Josh. He's like in Washington somewhere. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's a weird thing.
Literally, like, it's kind of freaking me out, bro, because you haven't blinked in like 20 minutes, and I'm concerned.
Yeah. I've had a bad cold.
Oh my god, y'all are crazy.
We praying for you, dog. Man.
Well, we've been talking for a while, so I think we'll wrap up. But yeah. Thanks again. And
thank you so much.
Yeah.
This was cool.
Yeah, we'll let you know when it's posted.
Cool.
Not sure when that'll be, but yeah.
I don't think I swore, did I?
No, I mean we have had guests that drop stuff. That when me and Cal were first starting, we talked because I was just like, we're gonna have some. I don't know. We're gonna purposefully have people on who are not like, I guess you could say traditional or conventional, like not just like polished church people.
I'll be completely 100%.
Right.
I cuss like a sailor most of the time. I have this shirt that says "I love Jesus, but I cuss a little," and my daughter says it's a lie because I cuss a lot. I'm a firm believer that God has given us cuss words to just like, how you like let the steam off in a pressure cooker. Like, if I didn't cuss once in a while, I'd probably my head would like literally pop right off. So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, one of the conversations we had though, I was just like, I mean, like I like me and Cal don't like on the show, but we had a youth pastor that I served under years ago that we would do like man on the street interviews with people,
right?
And like the first couple times that we did them, I was just like, Wally, like these teenagers, like just they cost a ton. I was just like, so I'm gonna have to do a lot of editing. Um, and his thing was, he was just like, I mean, as long as it's not like intentionally crude, like
Or derogatory.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
he was just
Right.
like, I am not really a big fan of like censoring people's real reactions to things. So
Yeah.
he was just like,
That's fair.
whatever. So we've kind of had the same approach, where it's just like, hey, that's how someone talks, as long
Right.
as it's not excessive for the sake of being, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah, no, like I think that God uses whatever personality traits you have to minister to whatever people He wants you to. Like, I'm not saying I cuss for the Lord; that would be silly. But like, I present myself in a certain way, I look a certain way, I act a certain way, and those things happen to
connect with people.
connect
yeah.
and make other people feel comfortable around me. They wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable around a preacher in a collar or something like that.
Yeah.